The Barn and the Book. Chapter 3. The painting project began in the first week of October. All the parents and teenagers brought their oldest clothes to church at the monastery each Sunday. The nuns made soup and bread for lunch, and after lunch, the parents and teenagers spent the afternoon chipping old paint off buildings, sanding rough wood, and applying an undercoat and a topcoat of new paint. On cold, clear days, they painted outside. When it rained, they painted inside. Everyone wanted the monastery to look its best for the celebration in the spring. Sister Catherine, who was an excellent planner, made a diagram that included every building on the monastery grounds, even Saucer's doghouse. She drew a neat square or rectangle to show the location of each building, and each of these shapes had a checklist of tasks next to it in small, neat handwriting. The checklist said, chip paint, sand and clean, primer, first coat, second coat, finish. Each item on the list had a tiny box next to it, and Sister Catherine made a tiny check in the tiny box each time a task was completed. The diagram was posted in the monastery office, and Sister Anna gazed at it reverently every time she came to the office. It was miraculous to her. Sister Catherine had not left out a single building. Sister Catherine had not forgotten a single task. All the words were spelled correctly, and the checkboxes were so tiny and so remarkably uniform in shape and perfect in size. Every Sunday, Grace tried to join the team of grown-ups and older kids so she could paint a building. She loved paint. She loved the heavy wooden brushes with their smooth, flexible bristles. She loved the thick, creamy paint. She loved the wet, ploppy sound of paint slapping against wood and soaking into all its pores and creases. "No, dear," said Grace's mother every Sunday. "Sister Catherine only has enough brushes and paint pots for the grown-ups to use. The best help you children can give us is to play happily together while we get this work done." "Couldn't I paint just a little bit?" pleaded Grace. "I could share with you." "I know, love, but this is a big job, and we only have a few months to get it done. All of your new friends are here. Use this time to get to know them better." Grace's mother turned her head back and forth, searching for Grace's new friends. She looked almost exactly like Grace, only bigger. Her black hair was beautifully braided, her face was round and hopeful, and although she didn't carry rocks in her pockets everywhere she went, it wasn't hard to imagine that she might have done that when she was younger. Grace sighed. Her chin sank to her chest, and she was about to explain to her mother that she really, really wanted to paint when her eye caught a glimmer of something shiny on the ground not far from her feet. A golden rock? No, a bracelet. Was it a bracelet? Grace leaned over. It was a bracelet. There weren't any jewels on it, just round wooden beads and a shiny silver cross. Maybe it belonged to a nun? "Look," said Grace's mother, who hadn't noticed the bracelet. "There's Macrina. You could play with her, honey. It's so nice to have a girl next door now that we're in our new house." Grace looked up. "I found a bracelet, Mama. Can I keep it?" "Oh, it's someone's prayer beads. See if you can find out who lost it. Ask the other kids. Maybe it belongs to one of them. It will give you something to do while I paint the monastery with Daddy." Grace's mother gave her a quick hug and walked away. Grace tucked the bracelet into her pocket and set off joyfully. Next to finding goats or golden rocks, going on a mission was Grace's favorite thing to do. Macrina came along the path toward Grace. She wore a long wool coat buttoned up to her chin, and she carried a notebook and pencil. Grace thought there was something funny about the way Macrina walked. She placed her feet so carefully and held herself so straight. Grace wondered if Macrina was telling herself a story in her head and secretly acting it out as she walked along. "Hi, Macrina," chirped Grace, juggling the bracelet in her gloved hand. "Is this yours?" "Oh, hello, Grace." Macrina kept walking. Grace tried again. "Is this yours?" She held up the bracelet. Macrina glanced at it over her shoulder. "No, it's not." "Are you painting?" called Grace to Macrina's back. Macrina stopped. "No, only the adults are painting." Grace nodded. "Besides, I have work to do," said Macrina, tightening her hold on the notebook. "Your story?" Grace's eyes widened. I forgot I have to write my story too. Macrina shrugged. Can I come with you? No, I want to work by myself. Macrina started walking again. Grace watched her go. Macrina's one long braid twitched importantly with every step. Grace sighed gustily. She turned and was about to start down the path toward the refectory when she had an idea. I could spy on Macrina, she thought gleefully. I could hide in the bushes and see what she does. Grace waited a few more seconds until Macrina reached a bend in the path. Then she skidded across the frosty grass and flopped down beside a large bush. She peered through the pricker-spiked branches and saw Macrina, still walking along the path with her nose in the air. Grace was sure she was talking to herself. Grace counted to 3 and stood up. She picked out another bush on the other side of the path, just a little farther on. Macrina was still walking. Grace charged across the path and flung herself down behind her chosen bush. This one had only a few spindly branches. It was not a good hiding place. Grace sneezed. Whatchoo! It was an unexpected sneeze and very loud. Down the path, Macrina lifted her head. Her steps slowed. Grace flattened herself on the ground and closed her eyes tight. For some reason, she always felt more invisible with her eyes closed. Grace, stop following me. I told you I wanted to go by myself. Grace opened one eye. Macrina's shiny black boots were only a few inches from her face. Before she could think of what a spy should say if the enemy caught her, Grace heard another voice. What are you guys doing? Is that Grace under a bush? Grace opened her other eye and saw Elias coming up the path. Yes, it's Grace under a bush, and she's following me when I told her not to, said Macrina disgustedly. Hi, Grace, said Elias. Goodbye, both of you, said Macrina firmly, and she flounced away down the path again. What's with her? Asked Elias. Grace rolled over and stood up. I just wanted to see her write her story. You don't know Macrina, retorted Elias, grinning. My mom keeps telling me to play with her. Why? Grace hitched up her sock. Because we moved here this summer, and Macrina lives next door to our new house. Elias looked at her, considering. I don't know. You seem pretty different from Macrina. Grace smiled at him. Look, I found a bracelet. Is it yours? Elias held out his hand, and Grace dropped the bracelet into it. I think it's Matthew's. Where did you find it? It was on the grass back there. Grace pointed vaguely over her shoulder. We could go give it to him. Sure, why not? Elias stuffed the bracelet in his coat pocket and started down the path, with Grace walking beside him. Don't let Macrina discourage you about your story, said Elias suddenly. She's always trying to boss everyone, but she's not in charge. If you want to write a story for the book, you should write it. Are you going to write one? Asked Grace. Maybe, said Elias. I think some of the other kids are, too. Macrina will probably win, sighed Grace. She's older than me. Yeah, but she's not the judge, Elias reminded her. The nuns get to pick whose story goes in the book. Just because Macrina thinks she's better than you doesn't mean the nuns agree with her. Do the nuns like me? Wondered Grace. Sure they do, said Elias, grinning. Nuns like everybody. Everybody? Elias nodded. The nuns even like Macrina, he said impressively.